talk about that. The first thing I want to talk about, though, was wildscaping. Wildscaping is creating wildlife habitat in our own gardens. What kind of wildlife am I talking about? Cougars, yeah! Mountain lions, black bears, lizards, butterflies, hummingbirds, not so much the grasshoppers, cottontails. We're talking about creating a well-balanced, happy habitat. We're not talking about inviting lots of rats in or inviting lots of anything that we're not really. Wildlife is neither good nor bad. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is creating a balanced wildlife habitat. I got a call from somebody in Northwest Austin who said, yeah, this Wildscapes program looks pretty interesting, but if I'm going to attract more coyotes to my yard, I really don't want to do that. Okay, that's understandable. Let's start there. Coyotes in your yard. What happens? Coyotes are, they do pretty well just about anywhere, don't they? They're really, really adaptable. We call those, scientists call those generalist species. Generalist species do pretty well just about anywhere. On the other end of the spectrum is, let's say, golden cheek warbler. How many habitats does that thing do well in? One. In a very specialized habitat. If it's altered in any way, they don't do very well. So what we try to do with creating a wildscape is create a habitat that's well balanced so that not just generalists can survive there, because that's what's happening when you get a lot of one species. What we're providing in that case is an unbalanced habitat that only the very adaptable can live in. So you're going to see a lot of cottontail rabbits, a lot of coyotes, a lot of cotton rats, the cotton rats, you know the cotton rats, little cotton rats, they're native, they're okay. They're food for snakes. So when we create that unbalanced habitat, we're going to have a whole lot of those species. When we create a balanced habitat with native species providing food and shelter and plenty of water, what we're going to have is a balanced habitat that attracts things like black-chinned hummingbirds and ruby-throated hummingbirds and a variety of different butterflies and some six-line race runner lizards and some box turtles maybe, and God forbid a Houston toad. Probably not. Okay, so how do we create it? Food, water, shelter, provided in the appropriate densities or concentrations or arrangements. So food, what provides food for wildlife?
Oh, the wildlife.
Oh, the wildlife, that's one thing. So in that context, we need to consider what we're putting out into our environment, like the chemical pesticides or petrochemical-based pesticides. Things like that will alter the balance, so we won't have so many insects in the garden. Well, that's okay for the tomatoes, but it's not so okay for the birds. And as it turns out, when I apply pesticides to my garden, if I'm not really, really targeted, if I'm not really, really addressing just one species, and even if I am sometimes, I'll throw the balance off and something else will come back in that's even worse. Which happened this year with my tomatoes, fire ants, aphids, oh my. You know what? I had a really great population of ladybugs, and I was so excited about all my ladybugs. But I forgot. I know what a larval ladybug looks like, and obviously an adult ladybug looks like. But I forgot to think about what the eggs look like. And so I started seeing all these eggs on my plants, insect eggs, and I thought, oh well, I'll take care of that organically, and I started smishing them all. And I thought, you know what? There are a ton of these eggs. Maybe I ought to figure out what these eggs are before I start smishing them. So I went to my insect book and I looked up, and there's not a whole lot of insects that have actual egg pictures for them. But turns out ladybugs do. And they're bright orange and they're beautiful, and I smushed about 1.5 million of them. And so after I did that, guess what I had? Aphids. No ladybugs and a lot of aphids. You know who really likes aphids? Fire ants. Right. Fire ants love aphids because fire ants come and they take the dew from the aphids and they carry it off, and they have a little symbiotic relationship, which is great. But so what I did was I attacked the fire ants because I thought that's probably the worst of all evils. And so I got an abundance all of a sudden of aphids. Oh, it was crazy. Anyway, so food, water, shelter. So food, we provide native plants. Native plants is the biggest thing that we try to provide in the garden. Why do I say native plants? Anybody have an idea? Just because I'm biased for natives?
They were here before we were.
They were here before we were? That's my bias.
They don't take as much water.
They don't take as
They
much
are
water.
resistant to the diseases that have grown up here.
Absolutely.
Local wildlife likes to use native
And
plants.
that's the biggest thing. The biggest thing for the environment is the no pesticides, low water use, not susceptible to pests. The biggest thing for wildlife is because they were co-adapted, they tend to provide the best requirements, the best things for wildlife, and at the right time. So when you see lots of coral honeysuckle blooming, when do you see coral honeysuckle bloom? Anybody remember? Twice, fall and spring and fall. And the fall is a big blooming time, and it's kind of cool that we here in Central Texas get two springs, one in the spring and one in the fall. But anyway, so coral honeysuckle blooms in the spring and the fall. When do the hummingbirds migrate and need a lot of sugar and carbohydrates? Spring and the fall. What happens when they're not blooming? They produce a berry. Who needs berries in the fall and the winter? Yeah, songbirds. So the cycles that our native plants have coincide with the cycles that the native wildlife have. So when we provide for one, we provide for the other.